Hello, everyone. I want to thank you for joining us today for our session on adding form fields to a tagged PDF. This session is being recorded for future on-demand viewing. And during the presentation, a Q&A pod is going to appear on the left for you to send us any questions you might have. Just below the Q&A pod, there's going to be some demo files that you can download and follow along with as well. Also, in the top right corner of your screen, there's some arrows, and if you click on these, you can move the presentation into full screen mode. At this time, I'd like to turn things over to our presenter, Rob Haverty. Rob, over to you.
Thank you, Lori, and hello, everyone. I am going to share my screen, as I always do, and give a couple of disclaimers here as we get started. So I am using Acrobat Pro DC, and the reason I'm focusing on that is because we have done a lot of work over the last few years to improve the workflow in Acrobat Pro DC. So some of the things that I've been showing over the last 4 sessions, you actually literally cannot do in any previous version. Everything I'm going to show today, the forms work and the Prepare Forms tool has not really changed yet. We are going to be doing a lot of work this year on improving that workflow. So everything I'm showing today is applicable to most versions. I'm not gonna say all versions because I don't know how far back people go, but certainly Acrobat 10 and forward, you should be able to do all of these activities. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Rob Haverty, and I'm the Accessibility Product Manager for our Document Cloud products, and I've also picked up InDesign now because I pretty much focus entirely on PDF. And I realized I had the wrong screen up. All right, so I'm not going to go full screen on the deck because we're actually only going to do a couple slides in the deck, and then I'm going to go into the demo on adding form fields. Now, this is normally, again, as I keep saying, this is normally a one-day class on doing forms. I've broken it up into 2 sessions, so we're going to talk this time specifically about adding form fields to a PDF that is already tagged. I know that a lot of times in remediation, someone has already done a lot of work to create the document and get the document tagged correctly, but they've done nothing for the form fields. And sometimes the document is complex enough that you probably don't want to throw away all that work and go back to square one. So at this point, we're looking at, okay, this is a document that's already been tagged. In 2 weeks' time, we'll be looking at documents that are untagged, and we'll spend a little bit more time on some of the more complex manual fields. So in a sense, this is kind of the basics today. So the first thing I want to talk about is just sort of an overview to forms themselves. There are lots of things to think about. Forms, aside from complex tables, forms are probably the most complex thing to work with. And one of the challenges is the source document and how people have created that form. We'll talk about a little bit today about manually adding form fields. In 2 weeks, we'll spend more time on manually adding form fields. But the auto generation of form fields within the Acrobat Form tool can be very good, but it's highly dependent upon how well the form itself was created. And so again, as we always say, it's really dependent upon the source document. If form fields are well identified and the form fields are clearly labeled, then the auto generation tool can do a pretty good job. If form fields are not identified at all, they're just blank spaces, or maybe some different, a dotted line has been used, we might not pick that up. So you always really want to think about that source document again and make sure that that source document is well created. There is actually a tool in Word, a developer tool that you can add to your ribbon that allows you to add form fields. Now today, when you convert that over, you don't get those form fields automatically in Acrobat, but that's one of the things we're going to be working on this year, is that if you've created form fields using the tool in Word, then you shouldn't have to do the work again once it gets to Acrobat. And as I mentioned earlier, this one today we're talking about a tagged PDF because there might have been a lot of remediation work already done, and I might not want to throw that out. Are the form fields well defined? That was something we just talked about. And then adding the form fields and then tagging them, or adding the form fields to a tagged PDF, are the two different approaches we're going to go over the next 2 sessions. You have a lot of options here. You can always choose to auto-detect the form fields. You may find that useful, and you may not. Again, it's going to kind of depend on your work style. What I have found is typically when I run the auto detection, I'm anywhere from 50 to 100% accurate. And in my book, saving myself 50% of the work is a good thing to do. So I typically like to use the auto detecting of form fields. You can do that before tagging, and then you can auto tag, or you can do it after the document's been tagged, and then there's some manual work to do, which we will go over today. Or you can manually add the form fields, and again, you can do that to a previously tagged or an untagged document. So you have a lot of options. Regardless, there is only one tool to use, unlike in many of the other things we've talked about where there are multiple options on how you're going to get to the right tool. In this case, there is only one tool to use, and that tool is the Prepare Forms tool, or Prepare Form, actually, it's in singular, tool. And that one is already in your Tools pane by default. So unlike the accessibility tool and the action wizard, you don't need to add this tool. It's already there. We're going to go through a lot of this in the demo, so I'm not going to stop on all of these slides. I do want to just point this out so you kind of understand the layout of the tool itself. It's a complex tool. There's a lot of pieces to it. So when you open the Prepare Forms tool, along the top will be the form fields that you can manually add. To the right, at the top part, is all of the tools that you can use to position the form fields. You can align them with each other, you can match the size, you can do things like that. And below that is where you work to set the tab order. There's also some other functionality in there as well. So, enough with just talking, let's do some work. All right, so here we have a form, and as you'll recall, if you've been through other of these sessions, on the left side of your screen is a little expand collapse arrow, and I'm going to expand that to open up my navigation pane, and I'm going to click on the luggage tag at the bottom of the navigation pane to open up the tag tree. And so we can see, I have a tagged PDF, and it looks like work has been done, and it's in pretty good shape as a tagged PDF. So great. All right. Don't care about the tag tree anymore for now. We're going to close that. And over on the right side of the screen, I have an expand collapse arrow, or in the newer versions of Acrobat Pro DC, there are actually icons for each of the tools, and when you scroll over them, the name appears, but we'll expand that. And we're going to choose the Prepare Form tool. Now, it is not in that location by default. It's lower down in the Tools pane. I move it up. I have my 5 tools that I'm always using. So let's click on the Prepare Form tool. And the first thing is going to come up is a screen for things that you can do to start. Now, as you can see, I have the document already open. I actually prefer to work that way. It's just easier, but I don't have to. I can change the file by going out and selecting a file in my document folders. I can scan a document. There are lots of ways that I can get a document into the tool to work on it. In my worldview, it's easier to have that document open first. Now, there are a couple of option fields below that, and the Start button is in the middle of them. First one is this document requires signatures. At this time, I am recommending that people not turn that on. Do not check that even if it does require signatures. You will get a signature field usually, regardless of whether that's checked or not. The difference is when you check that, you will get a signature field for an electronic signature. And you can add that manually. What happens when you turn this on now is that you actually lose some of the options for formatting your form fields that I like to use. So I keep this turned off. The other thing is down at the bottom here is auto detection of the form fields. And it is currently on. I can change it by clicking the change button. And at the bottom on the Forms tab, under the General, in Preferences, under the General section, at the bottom of that, there is Automatically Detect Form Fields, and I can just uncheck that if for some reason I don't want my form fields automatically detected. I'm going to cancel out of that because we are going to automatically detect. So at this point, I'm now ready to engage the Prepare Form tool, and I can say Start. So I click on the big blue Start button. And fairly small form, happened very quickly. There was a little progress indicator at the bottom of the screen that kind of popped up and then was gone. And you can tell that I have form fields because I have these boxes, and in those boxes is a black shaded area that has text in it. And this is what we're going to be interested in at this point. So I'm going to actually collapse. I can collapse this right pane of the form tool, and I can pick that up later because I really want to just fill my screen with my form so that I can work on it. So the first thing we need to do is we need to go into the properties for the various form fields. So the way to do that is to select a form field, and you just put your cursor on it and select it. This is unfortunately the Prepare Form process is highly cursor driven at this point. There is no way to manually add a form field using the keyboard. There's no way to position a form field unless you can actually see where it needs to go. So there's a lot of improvement that we can do. So at this point in time, I'm going to use my cursor, and I'm going to select the very first form field that says Program Title. And you'll notice when I do, everything turns blue. The outline of the field is blue. The shading behind the title, Program Title, is also blue. So I'm in that field. Now, while I'm in that field, or once it's blue, I can right-click, and I can select Properties. You might have noticed when we were in the tag tree and doing some stuff previously, the Properties option was at the bottom of the context menu. In this case, it's at the top. A little bit inconsistent. I select that, and a dialog is going to pop up. And you'll notice there are 8 tabs across the top. This is what I was talking about. If you select the add the signature field, you will lose the Actions, Format, Validate, and Calculate options from your Properties dialog, which means if you have fields in your form that you need calculations, or if you want to do format a field like a date field, you can't do that. So I leave that unchecked for now. No issue, we're going to fix that. And First thing I need to look at is the name. What I want the name to be is exactly what the label is for that form field. So what the visible label, the text label is for that form field. Now, in this case, this form is pretty cleanly created. There was a clean underscore in the form for the form field itself, and the name of the form field was placed to the left of the form field. And so our auto tool can pick that up really well and does a pretty good job. The other thing that you're also going to want to be sure you add is the tooltip. Now, sometimes the tooltip may be the same as the name, and that's okay. The reason you need to add that is if you are using Adobe Sign as your digital document signature program, and it's becoming easier to do that. We've integrated it into Office so that you can actually send a document straight from Word through Adobe Sign to be signed. And in Adobe Sign, you can do this work of making the form fields accessible. But when the user gets it, the document itself is actually an image. And the only thing that will be read on first pass are the form fields themselves. And so without the tooltips, there's nothing that's going to be read because there is no label to the left. Even though there's a visible label, it's not on the screen because it's an image. The user can open that document in another reader and read the whole document and then go back in and fill it. But the tooltips are critical. So you want to make sure, even if there's nothing interesting to add to that tooltip, that you add a tooltip. All right, so this one, perfectly fine. I have no work to do. I love that. Let's go to the next one. We have a date field. Now, I'm going to actually close. You'll notice that I just selected date, the date field, and automatically the properties menu changed. So I didn't need to close the property menu, go to the date field, right-click, and reopen it. I can have that properties menu open and go through all of my fields. Before I do that, I'm going to close this, because sometimes when someone creates a form, they use the same, I'm actually going to open, let's see if I can make this a little smaller. There we go. All right. They use the same label. So I have a date label here, and then I have another down towards the bottom of the screen. I have another date label, and you'll see that one is date and one is date 2. I'm going to need to do something different with those because just calling it date isn't going to give the person the information they need as to date of what. So this is a place where I'm going to add a tooltip. So I'll go back to my date field at the top because I have multiple ones, and I'm going to say date, and I'm going to right click, and I'm going to go back to my properties. And this is the application. So what we're looking for here is the application date. So I'm actually going to change the name here so that I have a clear indicator that it's a different date. And I'm going to call it application date. And oops, have to spell correctly. And I wish there was a spell checker in here too. And I'm going to change the tooltip. Wow. Having typing problems today. Application, I didn't do application. All right, so there we go. Application date. Now, I can be done at this point, or it may be that I actually want to format this field. You'll notice that even though it's a date field, it's still just a text field. And so I can choose to make it a date field, at which time I can also choose the date format. Now, they didn't give me any indication in the form itself, so I might decide to just leave it and not make it a date field. But let's say that we wanted a date field and we're going to say month, month, day, day, year, year. All right, so now I've changed that. Then I need to go back to my tooltip and I need to say month, month, day, day. Was it year, year? Yep, I did year, year. All right, year, year. So I need to put that in my tooltip so that the user knows, oh, that's the format for that field. Now these tooltips also show up on hover, so they are useful regardless of whether someone's using a screen reader or not, because then they can say, oh, there's the format of the field the date field that I just created. Now I can continue on and go through the rest of the form and check. But it's also, you know, I can easily look at it visibly without opening the properties dialog. The next one, I've got time. I could format that also if I wanted to. I can go into the location field, and you'll notice that by default, the name and the tooltip are the same. So when that's all I have, then that's good enough, and I don't even need to go into the properties for that. Number of contract hours requested, ethics, regulations, registration fee, you know, it's got everything pretty well. Now, until I get down here, so please check intended audience below. I'm going to close my dialog for a minute, but don't want that. More space. All right. So please check intended audience below, and it says nursing home administrator, residential care administrator, and both. Now, if it did not have the both option, I might leave these, I might make these checkboxes. Right now, they're actually, if we go into the properties dialog, we'll see that they're actually text fields. There is no way to convert a field from one type to another without deleting that field and adding it. So I might have made these checkboxes. I could technically leave them a text field and someone could put an X in the text field. But because they are really radio buttons in functionality, I think I'm going to make them radio buttons instead. So what I need to do, and I can hold down the control key and I can multiple select, so I can select all three, and I can hit delete and just get rid of those fields. Then I can go up to the top menu here and we'll see the circle with the dot in the middle. That's our radio button. And it gives you a description. You choose a radio button when it's mutually exclusive. These are mutually exclusive. You wouldn't check nursing home administrator, residential administrator, and both. So in this case, they're mutually exclusive. So I select that. It turns blue. And as soon as my cursor gets over the document, you're going to see, I'm going to put it over the white area, you see a blue box. And there are some very, very faint blue grid lines. So I'm going to position this approximately where I want it. And I'm going to click to place it. And immediately a dialog box is going to pop up. Now for radio buttons, there are two things you need. You need a group name and you need the actual choice. So the focus is on the group name first. And I'm going to call the group name intended audience. And the choice in this case is nursing home administrator. And you'll notice at the bottom there is an option to add another button. So I don't have to go back up to the toolbar in this case. I can just click on add another button and I'll get my little box again. And I can position it, and it's in the same group still, so all I need to do is say residential care administrator, And I'm going to add one more button. Now, kind of a decision here to make. Do I want to put the button close to the text, or do I want to put the buttons in alignment? I kind of like it visually in alignment better, so I'm going to put the last button way over here. And this one, the choice is both. All right, I'm done. I can click into the document and close that dialog. Now this one looks a little bit different. So when I go into here and I go to Properties, which I could have done from the dialog as well, you're going to notice I've got Intended Audience and No Tooltip. The tooltip in this case is going to apply to the group and not to the individual buttons. You need to add tooltips for the individual buttons if you are using Adobe Sign, and you need to do that actually in Adobe Sign itself. In this case, we won't have those. So you have Intended Audience, and then under Options is where I have the button choice, Nursing Home Administrator. And you'll notice you can choose different kinds of radio buttons. I'm going to stick with a circle because that's kind of the default and the expected look of a radio button. So I can add a tooltip, and I probably will here that says, please check Intended Audience, so that I know what I'm supposed to do when I get here. And you'll notice if I go to the next one, it already has that exact same tooltip because the tooltip is at the group level. All right, so I'm done with my radio buttons. Now I can keep going down through the document, and we're not going to do the whole document. As always, we've posted the deck for you to use, as well as this document as a working document, and I have a final version of it so you can check your work. But I am going to mention a couple of things here. Now, here's where we start to run into some issues. We have address, and you'll notice that we have address 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Because city, state, and zip code, the labels for those boxes are below. And so automatically we didn't pick those up correctly. So the address field the text fields by default are unlimited. So I don't really need these two address fields, even though visibly there are. I could do them both. I'm going to delete the second one. I'm going to change this one. The name, I'm going to make it just be address. And in this case, I'm going to type in mailing address. I don't want to say street address because I don't know if they have a street. Maybe they only have a P.O. box. So I'm going to put mailing address in as the tooltip. And then I'm going to go down to address 3, and that's supposed to be city. So I change that to the name city and the tooltip city. And I will go to state and do state and state. And I've got zip code. Now, visibly the label says zip. So I'm just going to say zip for the name. The name is never exposed anywhere except in the tag tree. And I'll show you why this is important in a subsequent step. But in this case, I'm going to say zip code so that it's a little bit clearer in the tooltip. I'm going to close that. Not going to go through everything, but, and you can do that, and you can look at the example that I've given you. But I have a section down here that says CE committee use only. So what I'm going to do with this one, when I get to program number, open my properties dialog, and I'm going to put parenthetically CE committee use only. So that when the person gets to it, if they don't remember by the time they've gotten down to the very last field, reason, and they don't remember that, oh wait, that was for the CE committee use only because that got read way up here, I want to make sure that every field has that tooltip. And then the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to change this date to be reviewer date or date of review or something like that. The last date here already had expiration date, so it had a good name. So I'm not going to do all of that for the sake of time. So we're going to assume that we're done. So the first thing I'm going to do at this point is I'm going to save. I've done a lot of work. In fact, if I'm doing a big form, I'm probably going to save periodically. And I do a save as so I don't overwrite what I had, so I can always go back. And in this case, I'm just going to say delete. Got my form field, so I'll get rid of that. All right, I'm going to save it. Now, the next step I want to do is I want to check my form field. I'm going to do that before I do setting the tab order because I just want to show you. I already know I added 3 new form fields. I added these radio buttons. And just like in PowerPoint, in the form tool, whenever you add a new field or manually add a field, it gets placed at the end of the tab order. So you have to actually move that. But let's take a look at it. So I can go to Preview up here in the top toolbar. I'm going to actually expand my side toolbar too because I'm going to need that in a minute. So I'm going to go to Preview. And I can actually start, let's go back to Edit for a minute. There we go. I can actually start tabbing through the fields. And so you'll notice I'm on Program Title. It's not blue anymore because I'm there. I can actually start typing in information. So I can go to the date field, and let's say I type in May 27, 2019, and I go to the next field. It converted it for me, so that's nice that it did that. It may give me an error instead because it wasn't something that it understood and could convert. And I just tab through, and you'll notice when I tab now from registration fee, it goes down to name of person submitting application at the bottom of the page there. It skipped the radio buttons because they're at the end. So let's go back to the edit mode. And the first thing I want to do in edit mode is there's this little tool icon kind of between the two, the alignments and setting the positioning and the tab order. I'm going to expand that. And about here in the middle, there's a clear form. I want to clear my form of any data that I put in while I was testing it. So I hit clear form, and you'll notice that date is now gone. And now I'm going to go down and find my intended audience radio button group. And you'll notice the group, it expands. I'm going to close that back down, and I need to move that. And again, unfortunately, the only way to move this is using the mouse. There is no, so it's drag and drop. And so I'm going to drag it up, and I want it to be after registration fee. Oops, lost it. Drag it up, find registration fee, and drop it there. And then I can go back into Preview, scroll up to the top of the document, and start tabbing through. and I get to the first radio button when I tab. And if I tab again, I will be down at name of person submitting application, because the navigation for radio buttons is the arrows. And if I start arrowing, it will start filling that out. So I'll go back to my edit, and I'm going to go back to my clear, which is in the more tools in the middle there, and clear my form so that that dot isn't there. And I'm in good shape now, tab order. So I'm going to save again. I'll just save because I got it with a delete. All right. So we're going to assume now that we are all done. We have done everything that we want to, and this form is perfect. Great. I've saved it. I'm going to close out of my Prepare Forms tool. And I'm going to collapse this so that I have more room. Now, at this point, I have my form fields, but if I go into my tag tree by expanding the navigation pane and selecting the tag tree icon, you'll notice there are I'm getting no blue boxes around my form fields, which means there's no tags for those at this point, anywhere. So we have to add those. And the way you go about adding these, and this is really, of all the things that you do, this is probably one of the most precise. And it's not hard to do, but you've got to remember these steps. Again, they're in the slide, and if I have time, I'll go through this twice. The first thing you're going to do is put focus on the tags tag. It's not technically a tag, but at the very top, the root of the tag tree. Make sure you have focus there. If you do not, when you add these form fields, you will not actually get the full form field tag, and it will show up wherever you have focus. You need to make sure you have focus at the very top. Now, let me show you one additional thing before we do that. Let's go to the check accessibility, because what we're going to do is we're actually going to, a form field right now, anything you add to a document is actually an unmarked or untagged annotation. I use a Surface Pro, and I used to use the pen a lot to navigate my documents when I was working on them. And I would then run the accessibility checker, and I would come up with a whole bunch of unmarked annotations. Well, it turned out that the pen was adding little tiny invisible dots every time I touched the screen. So I had to go and mark those all up and tag them and then artifact them. So we go into the accessibility tool you might remember, which is, in my case, at the top of my tools pane. And I'm going to select full check. I say full check, start checking, and I've got some content issues, and the issue is tagged annotations failed. And it will, I can select these, but it's kind of irrelevant at this point. I know they were going to fail because I have form fields that are untagged. So when you see that, the same process is how you fix that, whether it's form fields or not. So I'm going to go back to the tag tree. I'm going to close that, go back to make sure I have selected tags at the top. And at this point, I can right-click to get the context menu, or I can select the drop-down menu to the left of the eye with the circle. I'm going to right-click, and I want to go to Find. So I select Find, and a dialog is going to come up. And what I want to find are unmarked annotations. Anything that is added to a document or that in a document that is untagged is considered an unmarked annotation. And I'm going to select Search Document. Sometimes I forget to do that, and then it doesn't select them all because it's on multiple pages, and I'm confused, and I'm like, wait, what happened? I thought I did this. It defaults to Search Page. I select Search Document. And I'm going to move this a little bit out of the way, and I'm going to click Find. And you'll notice now there's a blue box around program title. It found the first unmarked annotation. Tag that. I'm going to say tag element. I click on tag. The type of tag I want is in the drop-down list, and it is form. Don't need a title for the tag. And I'm going to say OK. Now notice two things happened. In the dialog, the find box changed to find next, but the focus automatically moved to the next field. And so I don't want to click find next or I'll end up skipping the next field. So all you have to do, it's pretty fast and simple, is click tag element. I did form before, so it's automatically going to be form again because we remember what you did. I say OK, it moved to the next field. I say tag element, I say OK. Now, you might have noticed, if your vision is broad enough to encompass the whole screen, that on the left in the tag tree, as I'm tagging these elements as forms, those form tags are showing up at the bottom of the tag tree. And I can just keep on going, and it's going to add all those to the bottom of the tag tree. We're going to assume that we're done. We've managed to actually tag all of our form fields. So I'm going to close out of this at this point. What will happen when you get done is it will say nothing else found. Forgot whether it says no more annotations found. So now I have these form fields, but they're not or form tags, but they're not in the right place in the tag tree. So I have to find that right place. And here will indicate why we name the form fields the way we did. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to expand this one, and this form field is program title. So I'm going to expand, and I'm going to go down. I went down too far, and I'm going to find the P tag that is program title. So it's easy for me to match program title with program title. I'm going to leave that expanded. I'm going to scroll back down to my form field that says program title. I'm going to select it. You can drag or drop or cut and paste. I prefer to cut and paste, particularly here where I'm would have to be dragging over a boundary. I just find that really hard to do. So I'm going to. The other thing that I typically do is I collapse this form field. I've noticed sometimes when I drag and drop, for some reason when it's expanded, it might lose some of the things that are subsets of that field or in that form tag. So I'm going to close that. I know it's the right one. I'm going to right click. I'm going to cut. I'm going to scroll all the way back up to where I have that expanded P tag. I'm going to select program title. I'm going to right click and I'm going to paste it. So the form tag needs to be a child of the paragraph tag. But if I go and try to make it a child of the P tag, it will actually put it above the label, because when you paste something as a child, it puts it as the first child. And I don't want it as a first child, I want it as a second child, so I pasted it as a peer of the program title. We're going to do this a few times, so I know it can be confusing. Much like in links, you do not have a proper form tag unless it has an OBJR or object reference within it. So we've created our object reference and our form, and the title for our object reference is the same as the paragraph or the label for that field. So it makes it very easy to see that I have things in the right place. So this is the format that I want. I want it to be a P tag with the content for that P tag as a child of it. with the form also as a child of the P tag and a peer of the content. And then there should be an OBJR, which is a child of the form tag. So let's do that again. So I'm going to go down to the next one. It's date. I'm going to collapse this one just to keep my tag tree a little bit cleaner. Scroll all the way down to the bottom. Find the form. Now you'll notice in this case I have to remember that I actually have application date is what I called it. I didn't call it just date because there were multiple ones. So I've selected the right one. I'm going to right click. I'm going to cut. I collapsed it again. Oops, what happened to my computer? It froze. There we go. All right, let's try that again. Right click, cut, go all the way up to the date, right click, and paste. Remember to paste and not paste as a child. And then I have another perfect form tag. I go down to the next one. I'm going to do the same thing. I always expand this first so that I know where I'm going back to, so that content is there. Scroll down, go to the next form field. It says time. Collapse it, right click, select it and right click, go to cut, scroll all the way back up, time, right click, paste, time and time. So now I can go through the entire form and do it and get this all done. It's time consuming. So next time I will be showing you tagging on an untagged. It will automatically tag those form fields and get them somewhat right. And you may find that that is a time saver for you. You may find that it is not. So it's really just a matter of almost muscle memory and getting used to this. So I'm going to close out of this for a moment. No, I don't want to see it changes. Let's open this back up. All right, there's my form. Let's go through this one more time because, like I say, this one requires such very precise steps. You need to make sure that you have focus on the word tags at the very top of the tag tree. You're then going to select the context menu or the drop-down and go to Find. I'm going to find unmarked annotations. I'm going to search my entire document, so I change the radio button there. I'm going to move this out of the way so I can see my fields. I'm going to select the Find button. Notice that there's a blue box around that first program title. Tag element, because I'd already done forms before, it remembered that. I'm going to say OK. Remember not to click on Find Next because it automatically moves to the next field. Tag, OK, tag, OK. So I'm really just clicking on buttons at this point. I don't have to do any work except click on buttons and go through the entire document that way. When I'm all done, I can close that. The form fields are at the bottom of the tag tree. So I need to move them. I need to find my program title tag, expand that so that I know I have the right one, and I'm also going to be pasting my form as a peer of the content program title. Go down and find my program title one, collapse it. You don't have to collapse it, I just feel safer doing that. Right click, select cut, go back to the top, select program title, right click, and paste it. Now just to show you just in case you don't believe me. Here's the date one. Got date. I'm going to right click. I'm going to cut it. I'm going to go up to the paragraph. I'm going to right click and I'm going to paste it as a child of the paragraph. And you'll notice that the form is before the label, and I don't want that. I could do that, and I could drag and drop this maybe to the, maybe to the right place. I don't drag and drop well. There we go. But it's just simpler to do the process of selecting the form field, right click, cut, go up to the content in the P tag, right click, and just paste it. And now it is a child of the P tag, but in the right place in the sequence. So the screener will read time, and then it will read the form field, which will say time also. So it'll read the label and the form field. All right, so let's talk a little bit about workflow here, particularly for forms. I know that in a lot of organizations, or I certainly hear this a lot, that people will create their form, let's say they create it in a Word document, they print it out, someone signs it, or maybe it's just a document that needs signing, they print it out, person manually signs it, they scan it back in, and then they have to go through the entire process of tagging a scanned document. This process makes life easier because you can take that Word document that's a form or whatever application you use to create your form, convert it into your PDF, get this all done, and then send it using Adobe Sign for a digital signature. It gets signed, all that information's in there, and I don't have to do any work again. And so it really makes that workflow more streamlined when it is all digital. And that's kind of where we're going, is we're trying to make this workflow from creation to completion of a form as seamless as possible. Ultimately, where we are getting to, and this will be true then even with scanned documents, you can use Adobe Scan. We talked about that with scanned documents. Scan it. It will automatically convert it to a PDF and OCR it. I can then add my tags and my form fields and send it on out. And so it's just one seamless, simple process. So that's the basics of forms. Not hard, but certainly time consuming. And as I said at the outset, in my preferences are to go ahead and auto-detect the form fields, because even if it's not right, like we saw down here with the address where it didn't get it, it got a lot of this document right. Well over probably 75% of this document, the form fields are correct. And I don't have to then do anything additional. And so it's just saving me a wealth of time by letting it auto-detect the form fields. Now, you may have forms where auto-detecting is such a disaster, it's just easier to do it manually. You may prefer to add them manually, and we'll go into greater detail in the manual fields and some of the more complex manual fields in 2 weeks, but it's your choice. So again, you have options. This is one option, and this is the option I tend to gravitate towards. We've got a few minutes left. Let me, Lori, are there any specific questions in the panel that I can actually answer at this time?
Yeah, actually one just came in here. It says, Someone in our group created a form in Sketch, complete with nice boxes. Is it better to artifact the graphic boxes first, then prepare the form, or prepare the form first?
Oh, that's a really good question. And I guess the answer to that it depends on the process you're taking to actually create the form fields. If you've gone in and done all the tagging, if you're doing what we did today, which is you're taking a tagged document, then I would go ahead and artifact all the stuff that you don't want that may have gotten tagged. You'll notice in this case, those underscores did not get tagged. Or were not in the tag document. So maybe somebody already had artifacted them or they just didn't get tagged in the first place. If I was not working with a tag document, then obviously I would create the form fields first and then I would go through and artifact that. But if I'm going to work with a tag document, I always like to make sure that the tag tree is perfect before I add my form fields so that I don't have multiple things to continue to work on. Then it's just nice and clean and simple. I add my form fields are at the bottom of the tag tree and I need to move them into the right place. And there's no clutter in the tag tree at that point. So I would recommend cleaning up the tag tree first and artifacting those.
There's another question here. It was from earlier about screen readers. The question was, would most screen readers indicate the form field name or the tooltip?
Oh, great question. So it depends on a couple of things. One is the verbosity settings on the, well, actually several things. The verbosity settings on the screen reader, the sophistication of the screen reader, but in general, what a screen reader will do is it will read the label, so it'll read program title, then it will read the name of the field, so it will read program title again, and then there's typically a brief little pause, and it will read the tooltip. Actually, I'm sorry, it doesn't read the name. It only reads the tooltip. So it'll read the program title, and then it will read no, I was right the first time. It will read both. So it will read program title, and then it will say name, typically something like name, edit field. Then there'll be a little pause so that the person doesn't have to, if they want to move on to another one, they don't have to listen to all that, and then it will read the tooltip. So you get quite a bit of information. Typically, I wouldn't repeat the name of the field in the tooltip, except that you really need that for Adobe Sign. So since I don't know how the person is going to send that document for filling or what tool they're going to use, I go ahead and do that. So they're going to get program title read a few times. But typically screen reader users are used to the fact that they're going to hear the printed label or the visible label and then also the name of the field itself.
And there was another question here on if you would recommend that they run the accessibility checker after we do these steps that you covered today. Would you recommend that you do that? Okay.
Absolutely. I always run before I finalize my document, I always run the accessibility checker one last time. This one's going to fail because we haven't actually finished it, but yes, always run the accessibility checker as sort of your last step. Because you may be using a surface like me and you may have a little untagged annotation as a dot that you need to take care of. Alrighty, I think that's about our time for today. So thank you all. I look forward to having you attend in 2 weeks when we go into manual fields a little bit more and doing the form fields prior to tagging the document.
Great, thanks, Rob. At this point, you can feel free to continue asking any questions you might have in the Q&A pod there on the left. And now we're going to go ahead and conclude the audio portion of today's session. You will receive a follow-up link to the on-demand recording. And thank you all for joining us today. We hope to see you again in 2 weeks.